Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Friday, April 11th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP co-founder and president Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So the Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling that says the Trump administration must bring back the man that they mistakenly deported to prison in El Salvador. Lots of moving pieces here, but earlier this week, Trump notched a few wins at the Supreme Court. This seems to be a setback. Tom, what do you make of the court's decision, and what do you make of the Trump administration's response so far?
Well, it was an unsigned order that did not have any dissents, so you can people are surmising that it was a unanimous decision. Look, the Trump administration, to me, on this one, this should have been, they've said with respect to Doge and some of these other things, look, if we make mistakes, we'll fix them right away. Like that's part of the deal. We're going to go fast. We're going to break things. But if we make mistakes, we're going to correct them. They've admitted a mistake in this case. And yet they are absolutely, defiant about not doing anything to fix it or bring this guy back. Again, we don't know the circumstances. He hasn't been charged with a crime. There was an informant who said he was a member of MS-13, but that hasn't been, I think, fully established or fleshed out. And so it doesn't make much sense to me why the court or why the administration is not more responsive. They filed a 2-page motion saying basically with his judge who wanted them to respond this morning, and they wanted the guy back here by Monday. And they said, look, that's not enough time. We need until April 15th to kind of figure out what's going on. And we'll, have a hearing on April 16th, and then we can be able to talk to you. But they finished the end of this brief said, foreign affairs cannot operate on judicial timelines, in part because it involves sensitive country-specific considerations, wholly inappropriate for judicial review, which strikes me as a bit of a,
right,
backhand to the judge here on their way out the door. So, in my opinion, they're being a little bit needlessly defiant and not responsive enough. If this guy is, in fact, if he is innocent and he's sitting in a prison in El Salvador, that's a mistake that the administration needs to fix.
Carl, what do you make of this? I mean, why would the administration choose this as the hill to die on?
Because they're stupid. Well, this undermines their entire regime. This is just, I've never seen it. You talk about an unforced error. Andy, this thing, and I'm not the only, every judge who's looked at this, every judge has come to my conclusion that this is basically an extrajudicial kidnapping. And he's never been charged with a crime in Salvador or the United States. The informant who said he was in MS-13, as though that's now a crime, just to be like, what he was wearing a bull's cap. He's never been charged with a crime. He came to this country when he was 16. He's never been charged with a crime here or in El Salvador, where he was born. This is, Pam Bondi suspended the prosecutor who went to court and was sort of left kind of nonplussed, didn't know what to say to the judge because they admitted his administrative error, and then they said they can't fix it. Donald Trump himself personally should pick up the phone, call the president of El Salvador, and say, this is causing me problems. Please send that guy back. It was a mistake. That could happen in 5 minutes. And the fact that there's not doing it, it shows an arrogance, Andy, but it's undermining. They've got popular support for what they're doing. They've said that Joe Biden opened this border and lied about it, and the American people and millions of people in it, and the American people didn't like it, and including among that group were thousands of criminals. But this guy's not one of them. And if this is the poster child that makes the ACLU and the Democratic Party looks good, it makes Trump and his people look bad. They ought to fix this tomorrow. They are undermining their own program, and they're undermining faith in the system and faith in their administration. I know that it's hard for Donald Trump to admit mistakes. You know what? Most politicians are like that. But they already admitted the mistake. Now just fix it.
Could it be, though, Tom, that they're afraid that some sort of precedent will be set here by caving on this? I mean, I agree with Carl overall, and I think the politics of this are terrible. But I also just trying to understand a reason other than Carl's saying that they're stupid. Is there is there a
That's
reason
not a
why?
sufficient explanation.
Well, it sometimes is Occam's razor and all that, but it does seem like could that be part of it? I mean, they want to do these deportations, they want to move quickly, and if this guy gets sent back by a judge, what's to stop thousands more from making the same argument, using this as a precedent, and saying we too must be sent back?
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court sort of ruled in their favor on that, on the use of the Alien Enemies Act, right? So they seem to be on solid ground, and as Carl said, with a majority support for finding and rounding up members of this gang and those who've committed crimes and getting them the heck out of the country. So I don't know that they should be afraid that this is going to somehow undermine the whole program. To Carl's point, it's actually doing more to undermine it by just being defiant and not fixing the mistake. If in fact, I mean, I would be really interested if the administration had any other evidence on this guy regarding whether he had, gang affiliations, because we really haven't seen it. And if that evidence does exist, then I think that would greatly bolster the administration's case, but they haven't produced it. And so, absent that, you have to assume that it doesn't exist and that this was a mistake and needs to be fixed.
And Andy, what do we know about this guy? What we know about him? He came to this country when he was 16. He's now 29. He's reported. He went to court. They tried to deport him. There was credible evidence. The judge found that he would face retaliation under the Refugee Act they didn't want to deport him. So he's here lawfully. He didn't enter the country legally. He doesn't have papers, but he's not here illegally. That's an important distinction. He's reported to ICE once or twice a year as required. He was given a work permit, legally work permit. He joined a labor union. He married an American. He had a child here. The child is severely faces severe handicaps. He's been taking care of the child and working. The Democrats made hay of this dreamers, but this guy he's trying to live the American dream. And for the White House press secretary and the spokeswoman for the Homeland Security to just casually slander him, he was he was a human trafficker. Believe me, if they had that evidence, we'd see it. And I just don't understand. Again, I know it's hard to make a mistake, but they already made the mistake. Yeah. So do the right thing. Do the moral thing.
I do want to talk a little bit about the upcoming election. Believe it or not, there is an election coming up. It's 19 months away, Tom. But we have a lead piece on the site this morning about that from USA Today. Just quickly looking ahead, what are the Democrats' chances of retaking the House? That's the first thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Senate is going to be a tougher haul for Democrats. But they just released their list of the top, I think, 35 targets of House seats that they are going to be working on over the next 19 months. And one of the reasons we ran this piece, well, a couple of reasons. One, we're a political site, and we
can't help ourselves. That's the real reason.
But it's also, it's also to provide a little bit of variety because it's just been nonstop tariffs,
and occasional immigration.
Yeah, So to provide a little variety, and we actually, part of the reason is that, we had this piece from the Washington Times by Tim Murtaugh, who ran Trump's campaign in 2020, saying Democrats continue to run failed 2024 playbook. So it made a nice contrast. This is obviously what we do at RealClearPolitics, is provide both, viewpoints. And I think Democrats do feel like they have a real chance at winning the House. And I think there's evidence to support that, that they have enough districts that if they get good turnout, and obviously traditionally, turnout favors the out party in the first midterm, that they could in fact win back the House by a small, margin. And so I guess the point is, one of the points of the piece by Chris Brennan, USA Today, is it's 19 months away, but it's going to be here faster than we think. And in fact, Democrats are already starting to put effort into these seats, and they're doing a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that they hope will pay off when the time comes next year.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we talked about during the campaign, the last campaign, was the betting odds. It's something I'm personally so very interested in. John Stossel actually compiles his averages. He's got the average betting odds. Democrats, 83% chance of winning the House. Republicans, a 69.3% chance of winning the Senate. Carl, does that sound about right to you, or what do you think?
That's based on historical norms, and it's, what the Democrats are going to have, 5 or 6 seats to spare in the House.
Right.
And the average turnover is 2 or 3 times that, right? But when I saw that piece in USA Today, it got me wondering about it and thinking, Donald Trump has sort of changed the equation in so many ways. And, the last time a president paid attention to midterms and thought he could actually influence and did a little bit was Ronald Reagan. Still lost 26 seats. I mean, but he protected all these what we call them boll weevils, conservative Democrats, and mostly in Texas and in other southern states. If there's a targeted list of 2 or 3 dozen states, Donald Trump could go to every one of those districts. What Trump has proven is that he's a magnet. He gets his people out but he gets the other side out too. When he's on the ballot, it's a net plus for the Republicans. When he's not, a net minus. My question as I was reading that story is could Trump flip that script? He's flipped so many historic scripts. Could he target those campaigns, go into every one of those districts and say, I need you. I'm not on the ballot, but I am on the ballot. Come support me and vote for, Joey Ishpingle. I was just, wondering if he knew how to do it, had an inclination to do it, and if he did, would it matter?
Well, he tried that in his first term and didn't really, work, because a lot of the folks that he brings into the process are these sort of irregular voters. They don't vote except for presidential races. They don't vote in midterms. They're not hardcore partisans, rank and file Republicans. And so maybe things have changed, but that seems
remember,
to me
Tom,
like
though,
unlikely to work.
That's probably, you're right. But remember, he lost the popular vote in 2016 by 2.5 million votes. He won it this time. So you're probably right, but I was wondering if this could be different.
Should we bet a bottle of wine on it, Carl?
Right. Well, here's the good news. We only have 19
By the
more
way,
months.
Carl paid his debt. In fact, bought a very nice bottle of wine and delivered it to me. I have it sitting on my wine rack. I have not tasted it yet. I'm saving it for a special occasion, Carl.
Good. Well, the good news is we've got 19 months, only 19 months left to talk about this. So we'll talk about it more in the months and year ahead. Anyway, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. It's Friday. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. We're going to be right back after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And, RFK Jr. Has been making a bit of news. He had an op-ed in the New York Post where he talked about streamlining HHS. But he's also promised to find out what the cause is of autism by September. Tom, what do you make of this promise? And what do you make of RFK's on vaccines generally right now?
Well, I did. We ran the op-ed on Real Clear Politics today, and I think what's interesting about that is, I just listened to Bernie Sanders say this in his town hall with CNN the other day. We have we spend the most money on healthcare for any industrialized nation, and we have the worst outcomes. Now, Bernie thinks that means healthcare should be, we're the only industrialized country that doesn't provide healthcare as a right. And RFK is coming at it from the other angle, which is to say, it's not that we need to provide healthcare for everybody. We need to make people healthier. We have the most chronic disease. And so he's focused on sort of, that aspect of it, but they're both sort of talking past each other in the same language. But the news to me was when he said this at the cabinet meeting, that we'll know the cause of autism by September. And I thought to myself, wow, okay, all right, we'll see. Maybe he's already figured it out and he's just going to wait till then to tell us. Otherwise, that was pretty newsy in my opinion. We'll see whether that happens or not, but I'm not necessarily holding my breath. But that will be a moment if he does have some big rollout in September. You can bet that that's going to get a lot of attention, both positive and negative. His critics will come out, I'm sure, for that as well.
Carl, What do you make of the announcement that September will know?
It was a little odd. Robert Kennedy Jr. had got in trouble because he was one of the people. There were a few of these people that, I don't want to call them conspiracy types because that's not really fair, but there was a study that was misinterpreted that some people took to 20 years ago that vaccines caused autism. And there have been, tripling or quadrupling of autism in this country. And people, why? And, one of the things people looked at was childhood vaccines. The science has not established any such link, sort of proven that that's not the cause. But there was a certain group of people just held on to this. And it began to be like the grassy knoll, which I don't mean to be disrespectful to the Kennedys. And Kennedy was one of those people. Now, he hasn't talked that way since he's been president, but this is a fraught subject for him.
Since he's been HHS.
Excuse me, since he's been in the Trump administration, right? But it's a delicate thing for him. It's an area where he needs to be very careful. And that statement, we're going to know by September, sort of sounded a little bit like the old RFK and not the new and improved RFK. So I've got my fingers crossed that they don't issue something nutty in September.
Well, again, another story we're going to have to...
And I don't presume to know why autism's increasing. I mean, I'm not...
Right. All right. Well, guys, we're going to do something a little different Friday. We're bringing back a feature from the radio show you guys hosted before my time. And here is a hint of what it is called.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
So, Tom, what is your You Cannot Be Serious story of the week?
Yeah, so we started this. This happened a few years ago when Carl and I were doing a show on Sirius, actually, our first go around. And we wanted something at the end of the week to be kind of like the guys at ESPN. They have the "come on, man," like they'll point out a funny play or something. And so this is what we came up with, and we love doing it. And so we wanted to bring it back. My You Cannot Be Serious is Jasmine Crockett. Earlier this week, she's been all over the news, and I don't mean that in a good way. She's really some people think she might be a mole for Republicans. I mean, the way she goes out and makes news, but she suggested earlier that the United States needs illegal immigrants because, quote, we done picking cotton. And it's just the Adam Coleman, who is an African-American essayist and wrote a piece for the New York Post saying that the Democrats now have lined up on the side of the Confederacy. I mean, this is the worst take I think that anyone's had on illegal immigration in a long, long time. And it comes from Jasmine Crockett, who's the representative from the 30th District in Texas. You cannot be serious.
Carl, what do you got?
Mine is a amateur golfer, Jose Luis Ballester, who's invited to play in the Masters.
Right.
Decided while Justin Thomas had been taking a little time on the green too much, and quote, "I'm like I really need to pee," he recalled to reporters. So he peed in Rays Creek, this hallowed place on this hallowed golf course, and giving new meaning to it's a golf phrase, to grant relief. Well, he granted himself relief, and to compound the "you cannot be serious" aspect of this, he was caught and he thought it was funny. He said he thought it was funny. That's the word he used, and then he said, "I'm not embarrassed at all. I do it again." So now people are watching the Masters and watching him, wondering when he's going to pee again on the course. And by the way, there was a men's room right on the tee where he was standing. That's my nomination.
By the way, for those who are not serious golf fans, I mean, would be the equivalent of like peeing inside the Sistine Chapel. This is like, you do not do this at Augusta National.
Okay, so mine is that there's this feud that broke out between Elon Musk and Peter Navarro. Musk called him a moron, but he also called him Ron Vara, which may seem like a weird nickname, but it turns out that in 5 books that Navarro has published, he's quoted a Harvard economist with that name, who's supposedly an expert on China. And it turns out there is no Ron Vara. It's an anagram of Navarro's own name. He just made up this guy so he could quote him. This was all reported back in 2019 by Tom Bartlett in the Chronicles of Education. His book publishers have added notes to all these books saying that Ron VARA does not exist. But Ron, Carl, whatever your name is, I would just be curious to know what you would do if you had a reporter who was making up source quotes.
Well, that would be an ex-reporter. So,
all right.
I would say to that reporter, you cannot be serious.
Right. All right, guys, we're going to leave it there. I'm Andrew Walworth. I've got with me Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon, but don't go away. We'll be back with more right after this.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief, RealClearPolitics, talking now with Sean Spicer. You'll remember him as the former White House press secretary in Donald Trump's first term, and also host of the Sean Spicer Show. Easy name to remember of a program. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Good to see you. A lot of market research went into that. That was I can't believe how much money we spent. We went various names and logos and came right back to that. So
it's like who owns the Trump Hotel, right? Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, again, it was just funny when you do this, and you know this from all your time, but it's like we went through all these iterations. At the end of the day, you always want to get back to what can people search and find, and so
what can they remember? Also, hey, listen, let's talk about immigration policy because
good.
There's a couple of things going on that have gotten not as much attention, maybe as they should. And it's
what else has been happening, Carl?
Yeah, well, not just tariffs and trade war with China, and Tom Bevan was here. He'd want to talk about the Masters, but also, but even in immigration, this case has been up and down the Supreme Court. And look, there's a lot to talk about. But one thing is, there's a couple of things I want to ask you about because you were a policy guy as well as a politics guy. Internal Revenue Service is working with immigration to try and find out some of these people who are here maybe illegally. The Trump administration has also announced fines against people who have deportation orders. Do you think these kinds of measures can work? They're less sexy. They're certainly less draconian than, taking some guy off the street who's got his autistic daughter with him. He's on his way to school and, sending him 24 hours to a Salvadoran prison. But what do you think of these approaches the Trump administration has taken to try and get the immigration service back to kind of what it used to be, which is putting pressure on, I guess, on employers too, as well as illegals? I want you to talk about that.
Yeah. So there's two things. One is, I think what we have seen is a patchwork. So we had Trump first administration, Obama, then Trump, Biden, now Trump, and we go through this iteration of what priorities you have when it comes to immigration. I want the president to codify a lot of this in law. And there's a lot of things that I think while you have a Republican majority, we could do. Visa reform, numbers, customs. There's a lot of stuff to use while you have a majority so that we don't have to, because you think about this like an EKG. You keep going back and forth on policy, whether we enforce it or not. That's what matters. And it was funny. I've got a buddy of mine who does some international contracting, and they got these billboards somewhere in South America. And he was saying during Trump, they had these billboards up, and I think it was a State Department contract, but please don't hold me to that. And they would say, the borders of America are closed, don't come. And then when Biden came in, it said need help, and it had a phone number. And you can, so the shift is pretty clear. You remember at one point they asked Kamala Harris, what's your message? She said, don't. But it was almost like she winked at the same time. Don't come, wink, nod. Because if you do, we're going to give you a phone card, a hotel room, and a bunch of cash. It's sort of like, wait, don't come? I thought but the problem is that if we don't codify this stuff in law, and that's why what I would urge President Trump and the Republican Congress to do is put this stuff on, because what we see is a lot of times the court says, okay, but the law says X, right? I know what the intention is. And so my view is that instead of hoping for a good judge or judge shopping, that the Republican Congress, while it controls both chambers and a Republican president, codify this stuff in law, make the appropriate reform, get to the 10, 15 things you agree upon, package it up, and send it and lock it in, right?
Well, could they put together a package that could get Democrat support or at
maybe
least some in the Senate? Because what the Democrats have always said they cared about, the ones who are serious about the issue, is the dreamers. And if you
right.
These people brought here 30 years ago as children, they don't even speak Spanish
Well,
anymore.
President Trump's actually pretty sympathetic to that too.
So if you put together a package like that, could you get something through Congress that would actually? It'd be like, look, we said on our show yesterday, we haven't had a major immigration law since 1986.
Right.
Yeah.
But see, so my point is, first of all, I have a separate view on this. Personally, I think that if you're in the country illegally, maybe we give those people permanent status, but don't, again, and that's in the weeds. But the larger point that you and I think are both saying is codify some of this stuff. Don't allow it to, because if you're in this country illegally, the last 4 years prior to Trump was, hey, don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. And frankly, we'll incentivize it. Then Trump says, no, we're going to kick you out. And I think if there's a law, if we can codify some of this, then we're not going administration to administration. And that,
don't you think that the key here one of them is, this refugee status. It's been used in a way it was never originally intended.
Right.
And so all a person has to do is, and they're told to this by, Catholic Charities or a lawyer, say that you're going to be killed if you go back to your country. Well, I'm not going to be killed. Yeah, but just say it, and, oh, really? And that's the magic word. And so even by the end of the Biden administration, by the middle of it, they didn't even have to say that. They were coming and they were basically given a piece of paper that says, in a language they may or not even read, come to court on August 33rd, 2032.
Right. And oh, by the way, if you don't come, which you're right, because they kicked it 5 years, 8 years down the road. Yeah. And by the way, if you don't come, there's really no penalty for it. So everybody knew it was a joke.
Well, but also, and this is where I think the Republicans should be careful, Sean, but, correct me if you disagree or refute it. If that's how you were treating refugees, it's hard to say they were committing a crime. It didn't feel like to them like they were committing a crime. It felt like the country must have wanted them to treat them that way. Free hotels, court date 5 years.
Right. That's fair enough. Like if you're sitting back and because I think a lot of these folks get trafficked and they're sold, like, look, they clearly want you. They're putting you up in these hotels. They're giving you a gift card and a phone. And if you don't know better, you're like, wow, it sounds like they actually want us. Yeah. So I agree with you. And that's why my view is, guys, every time, if we don't codify some of this in law, then what's going to happen is the next administration is going to say, well, this is how we're interpreting this law, or this is what we're not going to enforce. But the one thing that I have also found is where the Trump administration has hit a bunch of hurdles on a bunch of things is that the judges will say, well, the law says X. So if we can get the law codified where you have a Republican Congress, then the law actually favors us and don't have to worry about the interpretation of an article, 3 court or whatever. So my personal view is, there's a game. Which one is this? One of those game shows where they lock in the money, it goes up, and they go bank and they lock it in. And my view is, guys, find that, there might be 50 immigration issues. Find the 20 that you agree on, bank it. Instead of getting, all tied up in the weeds with, well, I don't buy into that. Say, what are the 15, 20 things that we agree upon immigration wise, and bank it. Because right now it's a hodgepodge, and and I agree with you. A lot of people are coming to this country under false pretenses because they're being sold. Oh, they actually want you. They'll give you a gift card. They'll give you a hotel room. You're
listening to Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary and the host of the Sean Spicer Show. It's a hard one to remember.
It's a lot of marketing.
I'm Carl Cannon, Washington bureau chief, RealClearPolitics. Sean, I was thinking as you were talking, I remember, I guess it was the 2012 campaign. Mitt Romney was asked his view of immigration, and he came up with this interesting phrase, self-deportation. Boy, we had fun at his expense.
Yes.
Who is going to deport themselves? Oh, what an idiot Mitt is. Well, guess what? This is now the policy of the Trump administration, and they're doing things to try and incentivize it.
Well, that's the key. That's the key, Carl, is that and I feel, I know Romney got a lot of flack for it, but he didn't create that. What I think wasn't clear then and is clear now, where Trump's making, Kristi Noem went out there in one of the commercials. If you leave now, you'll have a better chance getting back in, right? And
right. And the other argument, and that's a powerful argument, I would think.
Yeah, I agree.
And the other one is they're talking about fines. They did a little of this the first term when you were there, but they didn't really follow through. And of course, Biden got rid of it. But fining people who are, issuing them fines, like substantive fines. Boy, that's an incentive to leave because.
Well, but Carl, when you drive down, we all have a street in our community, and I know plenty of them where it says posted 25, and nobody in their life has gone 25 on the road because they don't enforce it, right? And so, but I was literally earlier this day driving off in downtown DC, and they had signs photo enforced. Okay, and what did I do? I got my car down to 25 miles an hour because I was like, okay, I'm going to get caught if I do this. And I think part of the problem with our immigration system is there is a lack of a sense that you're not going to get caught or deported or pay a fine or a penalty. And where I think Trump is different is that he's making it clear, you stay, the longer you stay, the greater the penalty will be. And maybe that penalty is never being able to re-enter the US again, or a fine or whatever. But if people know that, I mean, I hate to say this, not like, there's certain laws that are moral, right? Killing people and things like that. But like speed limits, you go, okay, why, if I know I'm not going to get caught because there's never a cop and there's no whatever, but I'm literally driving over this bridge going from DC to Virginia, and I see these signs that say photo enforced, speed limit 25. I know it's indiscriminate. Like, they're going to take a photo. I'll get a thing in the mail that says you owe $100. Well, I'm not going to do it. And I think we've got to do that with immigration, is make it clear what our laws are and that people know that they're going to be enforced.
All right, let me ask you another question, and this is the tough one. And we've been talking about it on our show all week and even last week. But
Listen, I'm ready for this because I do think the Red Sox are going to have a really good season.
I'm talking about the excesses of the
Oh.
Trump thing. The obvious one was this Maryland one that I mentioned. This guy, some informant told the police 10 years ago he was in MS-19. He's always denied it. There's no evidence. He's never been charged with the crime. He's father of 3, autistic kid, lives in a middle-class house, undocumented taxpayers, we used to call those people in California. And suddenly, 24 hours later, he's in a prison in El Salvador, never even been charged with a crime. He hasn't lived there since he was a teenager. And the administration won't back down. And I'm going to ask you, why, when they make a mistake like that, why don't they, all right, our bad, we'll get him back. And why some of these excesses, to me, and there's a lot of them, some of these students they're rounding up, they're undermining the effort. And I don't understand why.
Are they? Because look, let me ask you this.
Well, that's my opinion.
Right. And I guess my question is, like, let's say, use my speed limit example for a second, which is, it's the law. It says 25 miles an hour. Now, granted, it's not, it's I don't even know what classification. I'm not a lawyer, but it's not like you go to jail. Well, not always. Sometimes if you go far enough in advance, at least in Virginia, you will go to jail.
They put Jason Worth in jail for speeding.
Right. If you're over 20 miles an hour, it escalates quick. But the point is that at some point people don't, my joke, as soon as you put out little electronic things going over this bridge out of DC, I slowed down because I was like, okay, that's the law. They're going to enforce it. I'm going to get a ticket. And where we have lost our sense of rule of law is people started just sort of saying, I don't need to abide that. They're never going to do anything. And yes, it might be excessive. I don't know I've heard some conflicting evidence on that individual's case. So I will admit straight up, I have not looked entirely into it, but I have heard it's not as simple as, he just overstayed a visa.
Wait, to use your analogy, this guy he's going 32 and a 25. They pulled him out of the car, beat him up, handcuffed him, and took him to jail without a trial. I mean,
but
how about some sense of proportion here?
So let's play that analogy forward. I was telling you a moment ago when I was going from DC out into Virginia and I saw the signs saying photo enforced ticket. Like, I was like, okay, I'm going 24, right? Maybe you shouldn't have to have that kind of incentive to follow the law. But if you're in this country illegally and broke the law coming in, and you start to realize, holy smokes, they're serious, they're going after people. One, it disincentivizes people from illegally entering the country. And 2, if you're here, you might think twice about, gosh, do I really want to be staying if I'm in the country illegally, seeing what happens? It sends a pretty strong signal to me to say to folks, hey, if you're here illegally, you're not going to just be able to hide in the shadows anymore if you get caught.
Well, that's what the Democrats are saying, although they're saying it in a slightly different way. What they're saying is they're just trying to terrorize and scare the bejesus out of people.
But it's
wait.
Right, but all I'll say is just full stop that.
Yeah.
Well, we are a nation of laws, and and once we start saying, yeah, but if you are nice about it when you break our laws, we'll let you.
No, but this guy went to court and he wasn't deported. I mean, look, we can just agree to disagree. We got 30 seconds left. I need to ask you a question. Trump's first 100 days not over yet, but it's coming up on that. What grade would you give him? Donald Trump 2.0.
A-.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what I love about it is there's no pussyfooting around this. These guys are like, we have 4 years, we're going to get stuff done. And again, is it
So if I'd asked you before he untanked the stock market that he tanked, would it have been a B plus or a B minus?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, no, here's the deal. I for different reasons, I want him to stand up for immigration, and for unfair trade practices. And the idea that we've been suckered this big, all these other countries have high tariff barriers going into their country, market access issues. So I'm actually on board on that. In fact, where I have a problem was they came up with too many issues. So it was market access, and then they went through a series of other
invest in this country,
right,
lower export. Yeah.
So I mean, style, I might have an issue with it, but in terms of what their goal was, I was on board on that 100%. We're getting ripped off by these countries. It's time that we got treated better. So I was on board on that. I will say, if he can ultimately, some people take too much issue with his style. I care about the end of the day, and if he can get us a greater market access for our farmers, ranchers, service providers, I'm all for that. And I think the one thing I love about this time is I don't feel he is unleashed. He is ready to go in these 4 years.
All right, that's Sean Spicer. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief, RealClearPolitics. Thank you, Sean. And we'll be back right after this.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and our next guest is Nancy Rommelmann. She's a contributor at Real Clear Investigations, and she has written a new piece out today based on her exclusive interviews with the two IRS agents who were at the center of the Hunter Biden tax investigation and who have recently been hired by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to advise the agency on reforming the IRS. So, Nancy, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So Nancy, it's tax time. A lot of people are thinking about the IRS, maybe not always in a favorable way, but you had this opportunity to talk with Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler. And in your article, you trace their sort of 7-year pursuit of Hunter Biden and what you call in your story, their ultimate vindication. So who are these two guys and why did you want to tell their story?
Well, so a lot of people who've been conscious for the past 8 or so years realized that President Biden's son had some tax issues, including having paid, hookers and claimed it as a tax deduction. In what world? But anyway, and just, receiving gifts from overseas corporations. In any case, Joseph Ziegler was an investigator with the IRS. He'd been there a long time, spotless record, starts looking into 2018. It's pretty obvious what's going on. And yet he's getting this distinct feeling that things are really being slow rolled, but he can't really find out because his higher ups are the ones that are pressuring him. Like, excuse me, wasn't I hired to do a job? So in 2020, Gary Shapley comes in to oversee the investigation. And he too understands very clearly that things are being slow rolled. And after a couple of years of this, when they're having their weekly FaceTimes saying to each other, can you believe they're doing this to us, including, not issuing search warrants despite probable cause, refusing certain interviews, Shapley decides to start taking some notes. Mm-hmm. And it becomes very clear to him that now that Biden is in office, the administration and various parts of the administration do not want this case to move forward. Yeah. And in 2022, he decides to become a whistleblower, and Ziegler joins him, goes public with it, and they go from the frying pan into the fire, to answer your question.
So let's back up just a bit though before we get into sort of what happens at that period. I'm just, Ziegler, self-identified Democrat, yep. I suppose. So back in 2018, just at the beginning, how did this come across his purview, right?
Right. Well, he's an investigator who was investigating a different case about an online sort of sex company. Right. And he ran into Hunter Biden's name and basically saw that he had been making payments to prostitutes on this site. Okay, it's a something. He decides to just do a little digging, and he finds that in Hunter Biden's divorce papers, Hunter Biden's ex-wife is saying he didn't pay his taxes. Oh, also he'd received this 3.4 carat diamond from a Chinese energy company executive, which I don't think it's a big leap to say maybe this executive or anyone giving Hunter Biden money would hope for some access to his dad, right? I mean, I think
right.
pretty clear. In any case, he just says, okay, we've got another tax case. Truly, like you would look into me or you. Like someone hasn't paid taxes, I'm going to start looking into it.
Yeah, so that I think is so key to the beginning of this thing, because it doesn't, at least according to your article, doesn't look like there was any sort of political motivation for this. And the basic fact was Hunter Biden hadn't paid his taxes, and he had made a lot of money, including this money from Ukraine and other countries overseas, and this diamond. So it pretty much was a cut and dried tax collection problem, and that apparently is a misdemeanor when you start. And I guess it leverages up if you don't comply. But
it leverages up depending on the amount and how long you haven't paid your taxes. And it was pretty clear. One of the red flags for Ziegler was when his boss at the time, who was not Shapley, said to him, you need to set a higher bar.
Right.
It's sort of curious. It's like, well, why? Why does this person get a higher bar? I mean, yeah, if you want to look at it politically, but why? Why are we going to treat him with kid gloves? So that was the first red flag. But as you just mentioned, he would have cleared that bar because it had been years in the making and the amount. So it wasn't, and I had both agents talk to me. I'm very grateful that they decided to spend some time talking to me about what it was like to be, in the mixer here.
Right.
That it was very clear to them that this should have been a cut and dried case. There was no reason for it to be rolled down the road this long, except and almost axiomatically because of our political climate, when we just couldn't stop tearing at each other's throats.
Yeah, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm talking to Nancy Rommelmann. She's a contributor at Real Clear Investigations. Let's talk about that personal price they paid, because that's such an important part of your story that I don't think has been told before. Personally, what did they go through as they sort of, this, again, 7 years of investigation here?
So Ziegler had cases that he was on pulled. They have, I can't even enumerate the number of requests that they made for information or for interviews that were not granted for various reasons. At one point, Shapley received a letter of some point saying that he needed to admit to certain things or stop doing certain things or resign, and in terms of the Hunter Biden case. Ziegler was doxxed late in the game by, in fact, not someone on Team Biden, but from someone who had been had worked for Trump early on, I think at a very low level position, who believed that because Ziegler was, and because this case was taking so long, this is now 2023, because the case was taking so long, and because Ziegler was a self-declared Democrat and gay, that he was deliberately wanting to bury the Hunter Biden case. He doxed him. He put his personal information online. Ziegler's husband at the time, his business suffered, and he wound up getting a divorce.
Wow.
At one point in the piece, he says to me, people that say to me, oh yeah, you were doing this for political reasons. Like, why would I do this? Why would I have my job in jeopardy and lose my marriage? I was doing it because I knew I've never wavered and I've never changed my story. I was doing the right thing and I was following the facts.
What do they make of the pardon? Because that's sort of where the story, December of last year, Joe Biden pardons his son and sort of puts an end to the whole thing. Are they bitter about it? What do they think?
I don't think they are bitter about it. A couple of things. One, I think that, Biden's story here was he wanted to protect his son and his family members from, Biden's sort of well-known taste for retribution. I mean, I think we can all.
You mean Trump's?
Sorry. Yeah, Trump's. And so, that was like the reason. And a lot of people are going to believe that. And, there's some cost to believe that. Right. But I think they had some very interesting perspectives. Shapley's was, well, this is the biggest gift you could give to the Republicans ever, because now they can say, oh, okay, you're saying you're for the little guy. Guess what? You just pardoned your son, and into perpetuity, maybe we're going to do the same thing because you've set a precedent. But I think Ziegler's is really interesting. He said, Biden could never and would never have done this had it not been for all the information we unearthed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like, oh, you're actually saying you were right. You were so right that I need to protect my family from themselves. So I thought that, and isn't that a better way than just being bitter into the
Right.
future? They do have a future now.
Yeah.
which was-
So they actually have a pretty big future right now. I mean, I'm curious about that. So they've been hired by Scott Bessent at the Treasury
Right.
Department to advise on, I guess, on reforming the IRS. So that's a larger mission, isn't it? And how do they view that part of this saga, really?
Well, I think that this happened, and I put this in the piece. Are we seeing a little bit of tit for tat in the Trump administration? Like, oh, you're going to prosecute these guys that were because they were that Biden didn't like. Well, we're going to hire them. Of course, we're going to see that. That's politics. They told me throughout our interviews that all they wanted to do was to have tax reform. They realize everybody hates paying their taxes, and they absolutely do not believe, they said this over and over, for a two-tiered system. One for the rest of us, the plebes over here, and then one for the people who, have people in power and can make it easy for them. So I think they're going to be delighted to try and create tax reform. I mean, it's a big ball to roll up the hill, and then next year they transition into senior leadership positions within the IRS. And as they told me, the people that were kind of pushing against them now kind of want to be their friends, or in a nicer way are actually congratulating them and saying, you guys were the heroes here. We were wrong.
Wow. Well, it's an amazing piece. I commend it to everyone. It's on RealClear Politics and on RealClear Investigations. I've been talking to Nancy Rommelmann. Nancy, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
That's our program for today. I'm Andrew Walworth. On behalf of Carl, Tom, and everyone at RealClear Politics, thank you for listening. We'll be back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.